There are some mistakes that I see new chicken keepers make over and over again. And most of them are totally avoidable if you just know what to look out for before you get started. So today I'm going to go through the things that trip people up the most when they're getting into chickens for the first time. And instead of just telling you what not to do, I want to set you up for success because chickens are not hard. They're not complicated, but getting a few things right from the beginning makes everything so much easier for you and for your chickens. So the very first thing, before you even think about coops or feed or anything else, is choosing the right chickens for your situation. Now, if you are in a position where you can buy point-of-lay pullets from a local breeder, that is what I would recommend as the best way to get started. And the reason for that is that you know you're getting girls. They've already got all their feathers. They can go straight outside into your setup. And you have a real person you can go back to with questions. That relationship with a local breeder is really valuable, especially when you're just starting out. I understand that's not always realistically possible for everyone. If you're in a country like the United States, where you can order chicks from a hatchery, do your research. Look at reviews. Not all hatcheries are equal, and the quality of stock you get can vary quite a lot. Talk to other chicken keepers in your area and find out who they've had good experiences with. And whatever route you go, research different breeds and their temperaments before you commit. Some breeds are much more suited to beginners than others. Some are calmer, some are flightier, some go broody all the time, some pretty much never do. And what's available to you is going to depend a lot on where you live. So find out what breeds are actually in your local region and start from there, rather than falling in love with a breed online that you can't actually get your hands on. Now, once you've got your chickens sorted, they need somewhere to sleep. And this is where I see a lot of people get into trouble. The whole point of a chicken coop is to keep your flock safe at night while they're sleeping and at their most vulnerable. So the first thing you need to think about is, can you make this coop secure enough to protect your chickens from whatever predators are in your area? Now, predator pressure is different everywhere. Here in New Zealand, our main predator concern is mustelids, so that's ferrets, stoats and weasels, and they can squeeze through incredibly small gaps, like smaller than you think. If you have predators in your area, and most people do, it's always safe to assume your coop is not as secure as you think it is. Go around it, check for gaps, check the wire, check the joints. Because losing chickens to a predator that got through a gap you didn't notice is one of the worst feelings in chicken keeping, and it's preventable. I'm in New Zealand, so ferrets and stoats and things are really my main concern. I'm not the best source of knowledge on things like raccoons or foxes or coyotes because I just don't have them here. But the principle is the same. Know what predators are in your area and make sure your coop can handle them. And this is where I have to mention those cheap, flat-packed coops you see everywhere online and in the big box stores. I really don't like them. They look cute in the photos, but they are almost always way too small for the number of chickens they claim to hold. The wood is usually thin and poor quality, the joins aren't flush, and they just don't hold up to being outside in the weather. Here in New Zealand, our sunlight is extremely intense, and those coops just fall apart. And that thin, rough wood with all those little cracks and crevices is a paradise for red poultry mites. They set up in those gaps and come out at night to feed on your chickens while they're trying to sleep. It's really not a great situation. I don't want to see anyone waste their money and get set up for failure by coops that are marketed to look good but don't actually meet the needs of your flock. Beyond the coop you choose, you want to make sure it's big enough for the number of chickens you have. They're going to be there for quite a few hours overnight, and chickens do about half their pooping at night. So if they're crammed into a tiny space, that builds up fast and it's not healthy. And buy bigger than you think you need, because chicken math is real. Your 5 chickens are going to turn into 10 before you know it. Ventilation is the other big one. Your chickens are breathing all night. That creates condensation, and if there isn't enough airflow, that moisture settles on the roof and walls and drips down onto your chickens. That's how you end up with respiratory problems. You want as much ventilation as you can get without creating a draft directly on your roosting chickens. And make sure your roosts are smooth, no splinters, and ideally at a few different heights so your chickens can sort out their pecking order without too much drama. Think about what they're landing on when they jump down in the morning. A nice soft surface, nothing they can bump into. While we're on the coop, let's talk about nest boxes quickly. So I'm in here in my coop along with White Hen, very creatively named White Hen, and she is broody. So she's been hanging out here for a while, waiting for her turn to go into the broody pen breaking cage. But the thing about nest boxes is that you don't need as many as you might think. So there's 4 nest boxes here in this coop, and you only really need about 2 nest boxes for every 5 to 7 hens. That's absolutely fine. So most of my chickens lay in just these 4 nest boxes. It's their favorite spot because when your chickens, they're probably all going to want to lay in the same one anyway, and they're going to argue about who gets to use it first. That is completely normal chicken behavior. What makes your hens actually want to use the nest boxes you've set up is keeping them somewhere private without too much light, with some bedding they can move around and shape into a nest. They love to have straw or hay or shredded paper in there, something they can pick up with their beaks and arrange. That nesting behavior is instinctual, and if you give them the right materials, they will happily spend time making their nest just right. I like to keep fake eggs in my nest boxes. It shows your hens that this is a good place to lay. Chickens like to copy each other, so once 1 or 2 start laying in a spot, the rest will tend to follow. Keep your nest boxes easy for you to access. So when I come in here, it's really easy for me to see and collect the eggs. You need to be able to reach in to get the eggs without too much fuss and to clean them out easily when you need to. So your chickens have their coop for sleeping, but what about during the day? And this is something I think a lot of people don't think about enough before they get their chickens. If you live somewhere where it's going to rain for days at a time, or you're going to have heavy snow for long periods, your chickens need somewhere to hang out during the daytime that's not just their coop. You either need a very, very large coop or you need some covered space in your run. Because if your only option is to leave them locked in a small coop all day on a rainy week, that's going to cause problems. Bored chickens in a small space are going to start picking on each other. I live in a temperate environment without snow at sea level, but it does rain here quite a bit. My flock has a few different spots they can hang out when it's raining. Some covered areas and open-sided shelter, that sort of thing. I've seen people in colder climates using high tunnels as excellent winter spaces for their flocks, and that seems like a really smart solution if you're dealing with months of snow. And your run should have things in it. Perches at different heights, logs, branches, things that break up the space. Chickens don't love big, empty, open areas where every chicken can see every other chicken all the time. They descend from jungle fowl. They like cover and different levels, and having those things in your run gives them a low-risk way to sort out their pecking order. A bossy hen kicks another hen off a perch. She feels good about herself. The other hen hops down and goes somewhere else. Nobody got hurt. If they don't have those outlets for that natural behavior, it can escalate into actual bullying. Now, feeding is a topic I could talk about all day, and I have done quite a few other videos, so if you want to get into it, check those out. I'm going to keep this section fairly brief and give you the key points. The big thing is to get a good quality feed that is appropriate for your flock. And I want to be clear that commercial chicken feed is not bad. It's actually pretty well formulated, but it was designed for a very specific type of chicken and a very specific system. And your backyard flock is a different situation entirely. So the bag is a great starting point, but it might not be the whole picture. Make sure your chickens have access to grit because they need it to grind food in their crop. If they're free-ranging, they'll probably find enough on their own, but if they're in a run, provide it for them. And provide a separate source of calcium, like crushed oyster shell, so your layer hens can take what they need without forcing calcium on chickens that don't need it, like roosters or growing chicks or hens that aren't laying at the moment. When you offer calcium separately, the birds self-regulate, which is really clever and brilliant. Water is, of course, also very important. It's important that water is provided in a way that keeps it as clean and fresh as possible. Chickens are shockingly messy with something like an open bowl of water. They scratch dirt in it, somehow they manage to poop in it. Get a waterer that limits the surface area of the water available and raise it up at least a little bit to reduce muck getting into it. Spread your feeding and watering stations around. If you only have one feeder and one waterer in one spot, a dominant hen can just park herself there and not let anyone else near it. That's one of the fastest ways to create bullying problems. I have quite a few little feeding spots set up around the yard, so no more than 2 or 3 chickens ever need to share one space. And I put them around corners, so I'm breaking line of sight between them. I do have a lot of detailed videos on feeding your chickens if you want to go deeper on this topic. It's really important to understand the nature of chickens as a species. I mean, it's important to understand the basic motivations and species needs of any animal we are responsible for. But because chickens are a pretty easy, simple to keep animal, it can be easy to ignore or misunderstand their needs as chickens. Chickens are not dogs or cats. They have a completely different domestication history. Dogs and cats were domesticated to be companion animals, to want to be with humans, to be forgiving of human mistakes. Chickens were domesticated for thousands of years as a utility animal. They have very specific needs as a species, and those needs are different from what you might expect if your only experience is with companion animals. Chickens descended from jungle fowl. They're a bird that evolved in bush and forest cover. That tells you so much about what they need. They want cover over their heads. They want places to hide and perch. They have a social hierarchy that they need to express. And your job is to set up their environment so they can do that without it turning into something that actually hurts anyone. And the other big thing about chickens is that they are prey animals. Everything wants to eat them, and they know it. They hide illness until they're really, really sick because showing weakness in the wild gets you eaten. So by the time you notice something is wrong with one of your chickens, things may have been building for a while. That's why observation is so important. Spend time with your flock. Not just rushing in to feed them and rushing out again. Actually watch them, get to know them as individuals. Learn what normal looks like for your chickens, how they move, how they interact, who's eating, who's not eating. Because when something changes, you want to notice it early, and you can only do that if you know what normal looks like. I want to talk about something that I think is really important for anyone getting started, and that's where you get your information from. If you've purchased your chickens from a local breeder, ask them questions. They will know about chicken keeping in your local area, what works, what doesn't, what to watch out for. That local knowledge is gold. If you're relying on information from the internet or from books, just be a little bit thoughtful about who you're trusting. The thing with chickens is that they seem really easy to get started with, and to a certain extent they are, but that means someone can go from never having owned chickens to posting content online as if they're an expert, and that can happen pretty quickly. And when a lot of beginners are talking to other beginners, repeating the same things over and over, it can start to become an echo chamber where things get accepted as truth just because they've been repeated enough times. That doesn't mean they're actually the best advice for your flock. So when you're looking at information sources, think about whether that person has actual hands-on experience over a reasonable period of time. Can they answer questions from their own experience? And are they humble enough to say they don't know something when they don't? That's really important. Someone who acknowledges the limits of their knowledge is a much more trustworthy source than someone who has an answer for everything. I think it's a really good idea to have some books on chicken keeping. I highly recommend The Small Scale Poultry Flock by Harvey Ussery and The Chicken Health Handbook by Gail Damerow. Both of those are written by people with decades of real experience, and they are fantastic reference guides to have on hand. So that's what I would want every new chicken keeper to know before they get started. Choose good stock that suits your situation. Set up a coop that's secure and well ventilated. Give them a run they actually want to spend time in. Feed them well and spread out their resources. Take the time to understand what chickens actually are as a species so you can work with their nature instead of against it. And be thoughtful about where you get your advice. None of this is complicated. Chickens are fantastic and most people do really well with them. But getting these basics right from the start means you're setting yourself and your flock up for success instead of learning the hard way.